Good morning, good evening. My name is Bogdan Atanasov. I teach prehistoric archaeology at the New Bulgarian University in Sofia, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you today to today's session of our seminar in Balkan and Eastern Mediterranean archaeology. Today, Anna Eirikh-Rose and Dr. Julien Vieugué will speak about the excavations in Sha'ar Hagolan and their impact on our understanding of the Neolitisation process in the Southern Levant. Before we learn more about this quite interesting archaeological site and about fundamental topics such as the appearance of pottery and the study of technological innovations, I would like to take 2 minutes for a personal story. 4 weeks ago, in the last days of February, I started to believe that we should temporarily freeze our BEMA seminars. It was very difficult for me to think about archaeology, pottery shapes, stratigraphy, and so on, because my brain and mind were completely paralyzed by the idea that people in Ukraine were fighting for their freedom and are spending their nights in cold undergrounds and bomb shelters, while during the days they're looking for food and water. After my initial shock and the many questions it brought, like, for example, why this war? Was it possible to avoid it? What are the possible scenarios to end it? And so on. I started to think that at the end of the day, our occupations with archaeology are not so irrelevant as my first impression was. Precisely because of wars, our mission as archaeologists is to remind that people all over the globe are quite strongly interconnected, connected biologically in terms of DNA and common ancestors, and connected culturally in terms of similar practices which we observe and study again and again in apparently different environmental and cultural historical environments. As archaeologists, we know better than anybody else that there will always be conflicts between individuals and groups. But the role of knowledge, archaeology, arts, music, and literature is to find less self-destructive means to solve these conflicts. Destructions make people flee. In the last 4 weeks, thousands of Ukrainian, but also Russian people, mainly women and children, came to Bulgaria, and no one knows when it will be possible for them to return to their homes. As you know, our mission and strength is the protection of cultural heritage, but we do care more about living people than about monuments. That is why we are organizing a charity for children from the Ukraine who need some care until they become able, in terms of language, institutional arrangement, etc., to attend schools, kindergartens, and childcare. We will let you know more details about this charity, and we will be grateful for your feedback, advices, and support. Now it is time to leave the present transition from colonial to post-colonial powers and look back at the extremely interesting transition to the Neolithic way of life Julien Vieugué and Anna Eirikh-Rose will be talking about. Anna Eirikh-Rose is an archaeologist at the Israel Antiquities Authority, and she serves as a director of the Judean Regional District. Her main interests are the pottery Neolithic in the area. Dr. Julien Vieugué is permanent researcher at the French Centre National de Recherche Scientifique, or National Center for Scientific Research. His work is about the first pottery bearing societies in the Southern Levant. He carried out with Anna Eirikh-Rose a small-scale excavation and the major Byblos site at Nahal Zipori 3 before starting a new excavation project at the famous Yarmulkian site of Sha'ar Hagolan. He is currently leading the Sarah Stone project, funded by the French National Agency for Research, whose aim is to shed light on the basis, when, causes, why, and processes how to date for the late adoption of pottery in the Southern Levant. Dear Anna and Julien, I'm passing the word to you.
Thank you so much, Bogdan, for this very important introduction. Of course, as a French and European citizenship, I fully support your talk, and we all hope that the situation will become better very soon for Ukrainian and as well for Russian.
For Russian too.
So I would like first to thank, of course, Ivan Vasilev, Kamen Boadjiev, and all of the team members of the Balkan Heritage Foundation for inviting us to do this presentation to this seminar. So as Bogdan said, we will today talk about our excavation project at the major site of Sha'ar Hagolan. This project will take place within the framework of a partnership between the French Research Center in Jerusalem, the Israel Antiquities Authority, and the Balkan Heritage Foundation. It's not working. Can I put the next one? Okay, so as you know, of course, the Neolithic Revolution represents a major turning point in the human history, characterized by a deep socioeconomic and symbolic changes. As you know, in the Near East, the Neolithic transition is a gradual process which lasts over 6 millennia. From the 13th millennium BC, the Natufian population started to live in villages, as you can see here. I don't know if you can see my arrows. And they started as well to bury some deaths inside their houses. So quite a big change in human prehistory. I don't know if we can remove this, no? Okay, sorry, we have just a small technical problem. I can't see well the screen, but okay. So from the 10th millennium BC, the Neolithic people started to domesticate animals and plants. So this period, it's called pre-pottery Neolithic, where the people started to do some agriculture and livestock. And at the end of the Neolithization process, the Neolithic people started to make pottery, I would say around the 7th millennium BC, and we call this time period the Pottery Neolithic. So we will today only speak about the late stage of the Neolithization process, a period which is, as you will understand, not so well understood. Okay, so the pre-pottery Neolithic transition in the Southern Levant, which is dated of the 7th millennium BC, is a key period because it corresponds to the final stage of the development of the Neolithic way of life in the Levant. So I would say around 6,200 BC, the late pre-pottery Neolithic societies, which are called using different names, final PPNB, PPNC, or Razalian, according to the different archaeologists, start to disappear. And we can see the emergence of the first pottery-making societies in the Southern Levant. In this region, several cultural entities have been identified. Of course, the Yarmulkian, and we will mainly speak about this culture today, but as well as the Jericho-Nilotian culture, Korenian, Byblos, and Nizanim. So I would say in the Southern Levant, several late pre-pottery Neolithic sites and early pottery Neolithic sites have been extensively excavated, but very few occupied throughout the 7th millennium BC have been investigated. And the consequence is that the transitional period from the pre-pottery Neolithic to the pottery Neolithic remain really poorly known. So what do we know today about the PPN-PN transition in the Southern Levant? From an economic point of view, we can see some continuities. For example, some Israeli colleagues, can you hear me? Some Israeli colleagues show some similarities in Neolithic productions throughout the 7th millennium BC without clear breaks, such as in Sha'ar Hagolan or Eirikh-Rose. So, for example, the first pottery-making societies in the Southern Levant continue to use bipolar method for blade production, or continue to do some denticulated sickle blades. So we can see the lithic production change, but really slowly. We can see as well some discontinuities. For example, of course, the emergence of pottery, which start around 6,200 BC in the region. From a symbolic point of view, we can see quite a major shift in the region. The burials became really rare. It means that at the final PPNB, PNC sites, the burials are quite frequent. We can discover tens or even hundreds of burials, while at the early pottery Neolithic settlements, only few burials have been up to now discovered, 1 to 5 maximum. So it's obvious the burial practices change deeply during the 7th millennium BC in the Southern Levant. In parallel, the anthropomorphic figurines became numerous. At the final PPNB, PPNC sites, such as Eirikh-Rose, for example, the archaeologists only found very few anthropomorphic figurines, as well in Moza. But at early PN settlement, such as Sha'ar Hagolan or Munrata, tens or even hundreds of figurines have been discovered. So there is, from a symbolic point of view, there is a big shift during this PN transition. And you will see, Bogdan, how the Levant is connected to Southeastern Europe. Such continuities and discontinuities are very intriguing, especially since the 7th millennium BC corresponds to the first waves of migrations of farming communities from the Levant to Europe. As there is many Bulgarian colleagues here tonight, you know better than me that the early Neolithics in the Southern Levant, in the southeastern Europe, appears during the second half of the 7th millennium BC. And we know that some of the people are coming from the Levant. And so one of the objectives of our excavation project is to try to better understand and to highlight the dynamics of population during the 7th millennium BC in the Southern Levant. In other words, who stays, who goes to Europe, who comes in the Southern Levant. To answer to this very important question, Sha'ar Hagolan is, of course, a very important site. You will understand why later. But one of the reasons is that Sha'ar Hagolan presents a very unique stratigraphic sequence that covers all of the 7th millennium BC. So it's really a key site to understand and the processes underlying the PN transition in the Southern Levant. So Sha'ar Hagolan is an open-air settlement of 20 hectares. So it's one of the largest Neolithic settlements in the Near East. It is actually bigger than Tel Alula, Tel Sabia Abiad, or even Çatalhöyük. So it's a very huge site. The site is located in the upper Jordan Valley, here, southern part of the Sea of Galilee, close to the Yarmuk River, as you can see here. So here you have the Yarmuk River. Here you have the state of Israel. Here you have the state of Jordan. So we are really close to the border. And here you have the Sha'ar Hagolan kibbutz, where we will stay during the excavation. So now Anna will present you the previous excavation carried out by Professor Moshe Shtekelis and Professor Yosef Garfinkel, who excavated respectively the site during the 50s and the 90s. and you will understand why Sha'ar Hagolan is so important for the Neolitization, for understanding the Neolitization process in the Levant.
Okay, so let's speak about the prehistory of the prehistory. First of all, the Sha'ar Hagolan site was discovered in early 40s when the people of the kibbutz start to make fish pond and start to dig into the ground, and suddenly peculiar items start to find the peculiar items, stones, pottery, flint object, and two persons from the kibbutz, Yehuda Roth, that was lately accompanied Moshe Stekles in the excavation and was one of the founders of Sha'ar Hagolan Museum, and his friend Moti Golani collected all these items and turned to professor of Hebrew University, Moshe Stekles, and showed him the collection. And Moshe Stekles was fascinated by the connection from the collection and decided to open the excavation. Why it was so important and so fascinating? Because until the excavation in Sha'ar Hagolan, we know almost nothing about early pottery Neolithic in the Southern Levant. What we did not? We know the excavation of Jericho, okay, the early excavation by Garstan. There are few pottery and the flint tools was appeared, but unfortunately Garstan misunderstand the Jericho 9 layer, and they mixed pre-pottery Neolithic buildings with pottery Neolithic pottery, so it was nobody was understand. And some object came from different sites on the foothills of Megiddo, but nobody didn't really understand what's going on with pottery Neolithic until the Sha'ar Hagolan excavation. So Moshe Stekles came to Sha'ar Hagolan, saw all the collection and start to open few trench and excavation. So can you see here so very small trench A, B, C, and open the square and D. And also what he saw in the collection, also find in the excavation, the pottery, the flint, and everything. I will present it later. What did he not find? The architecture. They only find pits. Remember this. So, and after he took on the collection and he published the book about the Yarmulkian culture. He called it the Yarmulkian culture according to River Yarmouk. But some of the researchers still call it Sha'ar Hagolan culture. Okay, because it's a site is so important, the first site, and still now it's the largest site, that greatest representation of this country. So, what he discovers is special pottery that ornamented with so-called herringbone incision, special flint, sickle blade. You already saw special kind of sickle blade, and very tiny small arrowheads. And unique figurines. First of all, you see this very strange stone figures, mostly represented only by incised eyes and nose, and strange anthropomorphic figurine, very peculiar. But so this is first recognized like us in Mukian country. Later on, it's numerous sites was excavated and extended, and we know like Yarmulkian culture from 50 sites now, but it was still a big enigma of Yarmulkian way of life until Professor Yossi Garfinkel, then it was PhD student, start to excavation in Sha'ar Hagolan. Okay, here you see the start. First of all, in the 90s, with area E, and then it opened more 5 area, E, H, G, N, and F. And Yossi, he led large excavation, about 3,000 meters, but he only, in most of the places, he only opened the upper layer of the settlement. And they have amazing discoveries, and we'll speak about it further. Okay, first one, the first step. Remember, I told you that Moshe Stekeles doesn't have any architecture for years, until 1989, until Yossi started his excavation in Sha'ar Hagolan. The common view was that Yarmulkian live mainly in some kind of structure, maybe mud structure, or some kind. Doesn't have permanent occupation, and have a lot of pits. It was pit culture. And then Yossi, first square, bam, it has huge walls, the few buildings, floors, permanent, nice occupation. So, and then this is the first step. You see this wall, it's wide walls made of stones with mud brick structures, floors, any other installation, everything that you need in proper settlement. Okay, and then when Yossi Garfinkel finished his PhD, he decided to have 10 seasons of Sha'ar Hagolan excavation and excavate and explore this culture properly. And what he found, a unique architecture. You see, at least this is area E. He found, say, 4 or 5 buildings. He have each buildings, it was courtyard building. Here you see, this is an example of building number 1. This is the entrance in the building, paved entrance, and then you have series of rooms. One room is painted with stone, one is not painted. You have large room, and then you have a wall that, so you have closed courtyard and the rooms around it. And the same in building 2, and probably the same from building 3. So you have courtyard architecture, and what do you have unique, other unique? You have communal structure. You have things that you need to some kind of organization to build it. For example, he found the street. Actually, it was my square. I was participating in this excavation for 5 years. And actually, it was my street, my square, and I found the street. But you see, between 2 buildings, building 1 and building 2, there are street, and also between building 1 and building 3. What is it? Why finding street is so important? First of all, it's means that you have some social organization in the site, because you need organized few buildings, probably a neighborhood, to put this, to organize, to plan the street between the building, to keep it clean. And also what you have on this street, it's layers on layers of maintenance. So you need some kind of organization that maintain the street and keep it clean. And also you have the direction. This street is slowing down to the river. So you need probably it was large sites that needed to have to let the people come to the river freely. So free passage to the river. And also probably it served like drainage system, because it's little bit sloping towards the river. You see that it could be some unpermanent settlement. It's need to be settlements that already have some kind of elaborate social organization. And this is for now, it's not only unique from Yarmulkian culture, it's also And as well as I know, it's the earliest streets that we found in the wall. I don't know, probably you have a better example, but this, as far as I know, it's the earliest one. And another example of communal architecture is a well that was found in Sha'ar Hagolan. You see this in area G, not far from these buildings of area A. They found a well dug up until the water. They're actually here, you see these two people are standing in the water. So here you need for this to build well, first of all, it's domestication of the water. The river, it's not far away, but they still wanted the water inside near the houses. So it's need to be knowledge, where to dig, how to dig, and it's a lot of it's very hard work. You see this all the well, it's built from a large basalt stone to prevent from walls to collapse it. Okay, so it's also you need one family cannot build this one. You need some kind of communal organization to construct well. Okay, so this is very outstanding of Sha'ar Hagolan. And pottery speaking, Sha'ar Hagolan, it's a present of Yarmulkian cultures that we know that almost all researchers agree that this is the first pottery production in Southern Levant. What is strange about the pottery? First, we see this pottery. This is hallmark of Sha'ar Hagolan Yarmulkian pottery. You see this herringbone incision and red color, and we will speak about later. But what's strange about the first pottery in Sha'ar Hagolan? When you're speaking about very first pottery, you expect to have one kind of vessel, two kind of vessels, maybe some first training. But here you have the operate with full repertoire. Because this is the Yarmulkian vessels, all the Yarmulkian vessel from serving and consumption with the different kind of bowls, liquid transport and storage. You see the jars, sometimes they're very elaborate and with all this ornament. Food cooking, we have pots and holy mouths with sometimes you can find them on fireplace, sometimes they have fire marks on the body, and large pito for long-term storage. Okay, so you have all kinds of activities in pottery. And the very hallmark of Yarmulkian culture, we see that we will see also later that Yarmulkian cultures are very strict. They have their own canons. So if the vessel is decorated, it's decorated in certain ways and no other. It has certain step to decorate the vessel. You see this all herringbone in the incision. There always need to be first horizontal. First, you make frame, then you put it inside of this small incision, like resemble herringbones, and then you color it. Not other ways, because sometimes you see frame without incision. Sometimes you see the color, it's a frame and incision without color, but you don't see herringbone incision without the frame. Okay, so they have steps. They're very strict. They live by their own canons. It's very interesting about this culture, and you see this. And this is the usual ornament. It's bent, horizontal bend, and triangles. And same about the flint tools. The hallmark of Yarmulkian culture is the sickle inserts. You see this kind of denticulated baked sickle inserts. It was part of a complicated sickle. It's also one of the hallmarks of Yarmulkian culture. And small arrowheads. It's very small. It's like 3 centimeters, the largest one. You see, we don't know what you can hunt with these small arrowheads, and it's in very small numbers. First of all, I need to say that there's a lot of flint in Sha'ar Hagolan. It's like million flint pieces in the assemblage. So it's a lot of flint. It is very low percentage of arrowheads. And really, we don't know. Probably it was poison. Probably it was just for small hunt, because we know that from the faunal point of view, there was already domesticated sheep and goat and cattle. And probably peat, probably not. This is a big question. And we have still have a lot of stone tool, probably for wheat processing and stone balls. And very interesting, in Sha'ar Hagolan, amongst most of Yarmulkian side, we have a lot of weights. You see, probably it was net weight for fishing, because we still near the river. And on some stone weights, you have marks. A few years ago, and proposed that probably it was identification marks. Probably you need you have your net weight, you want to keep it yours, so you mark something on the stone. Maybe yes, maybe not. You have also luxury items that it's not originally from Sha'ar Hagolan. We have shells from Mediterranean, from Red Sea, you have obsidian from Turkey, and you have kind of different stones and stone beads. So you have also, this is part of large trade going on. And now we speak about symbolic world of Yarmulkian culture. As I already said, they have very canon. So it's a culture that have their own canon, and they're living by the canons. And they have few things that are fit in their symbolic works. First, we already saw the decorated pottery with strict decoration. We have enstayed stone and stave, and we have this very, very particular figurines. Okay, one of part of the symbolic words, or maybe not symbolic, it's this incised pebble with some different kind of incision. What is interesting about these pebbles, that first of all, we have two, in Sha'ar Hagolan, from few buildings, we have building 1 and building 2, and different stones were found in different buildings with different marks. Okay, and the same marks, since going to the steps letter, to the stamps. So maybe it's some kind of, I saw it a few years ago, maybe it's some kind of identification marks, like you already saw it on the fishnet. Okay, that start, and you have also stamps. This, you see, the same geometric incisions, and you have a kind of, we call it rods. They have different names. We still don't know what is it, but this object appears only in pottery, in early pottery, Neolithic and Southern Levant. In all sites, we don't know what is it. It's just appear on the site, and not small numbers, appear and disappear. And of course, the hallmarks, the anthropomorphic figurines. It's very strange, very nice, large, probably old woman's figurines. What is interesting about these figurines? These figurines, it's also goes by the same canon. Most of the figurines has all the same feature. First of all, the head. This is some kind of pointed head. It's kind of probably hat. You see from the other side. If you see from the other side, you see it's probably some hat that they're wearing. This strange eyes and prolonged nose. Sometimes they have a mouth, and also the ear and the earrings. You see, this is two parts of the ear. So probably this is ear and the earrings. And then you have some kind of garment then going on over the back, see from the both sides, and the breasts, not so large. If you see the European Neolithic statue, it's the different approach. So it is a small breast. Usually it's one head going to under the breast and other on the big, huge hips. And here is the huge, the bottom and hips are very huge. And sometimes they also have on the legs, they have kind of shoes. But this is all you see. It's here on every statue is the same. Different approach, large bottom, small breasts, some kind of garments and some kind of head. You need to be very curious with this one. And of course, what about the strange eyes? You know, for long time, this was called the coffee beans eyes. Okay, it could be everything, but not coffee, because coffee wasn't in the Neolithic time. So what is it? Some people tried, we know this eyes appeared in also in from North Syria and Anatolian sites. But what is it? Some researchers think that it's maybe the coral shells that appeared in eyes of skulls from previous periods. But you don't think that the both coveralls and the coffee bean eyes are simply resemble the wheat. So we have some kind of wheat goddess, probably some kind of prosperity from goddess. Okay, so it's some kind of connected to the growing or some kind of connected to the prosperity. But it's not only women, very few, it's 1 compared to 50 maybe, but it's also some figurine of men with the same canon. You have long body, the hands, and big bottom in the men. You live by the same canon. Sometimes very rare, but you have different figurines. This is a figurine. It's called birth-giving figurine. I don't know. I think it's very uncomfortable to give birth in such a position, but you never know. And this figurine, wasn't really figurine. So something you can put on a stick. So maybe it was used in some fests. Also, you have very small figurines, still from the same symbolic view, with head, sometimes eyes, and you have silence figurines. You have a very nice schematic figurine. So schematic, it's not came from the late. You have here figurines, pebble with only eyes and only eyes and mouth, on sometimes more detail, but this is the same goddess. And how we know that it's the same goddess? Because we found like this. You see the figurine this, and if you see this stone figurine, it's still, you resemble the anthropomorphic clay figurine. Navy, breasts, big bottom, everything that we have in canonic figurines. So probably this one and anthropomorphic figurines is the same deity. And we also have some few zoomorphic figurines. Still we have a connection with the wild and the nature, and also with the livestock. So we have very nice, interesting culture. We still not understand, and interesting, elaborated and canonic culture. So this was a lot of excavation, but it is a lot to discover more. So Julien will speak what we want to discover.
So yeah, I will try to explain you now why we would like to go back to Sha'ar Hagolan.
Yeah.
As you can see, it's a very important site. And so that's why we decided to build a new excavation project there. So Anna explained you, Yossi Garfinkel excavated the, I would say, the last Yarmulkian occupation layer in a very large area. But at the end of his excavation, he decided to do a small sounding to better understand the stratigraphic sequence at the sites. And what he discovered is that there is a huge, very thick stratigraphic sequence at the sites. It could show that there is very few and tiny Bronze Age, Roman, Byzantine, and Islamic remains. But immediately, like 5 centimeters under the current level, you could find immediately the early pottery Neolithic layer, which is quite uncommon because in the Southern Levant, as in the Balkans, you have in general tails with very long stratigraphic sequence. And if you want to reach the early pottery Neolithic layer, you should first excavate the Bronze Age, the Chalcolithic, and so on.
Like Jericho.
So, like Jericho, for example. So it's quite a chance that we could access immediately to the early pottery Neolithic layer. It's actually the same situation in Kovačevo. That's why the French Bulgarian team decided to excavate it there. And what Yossi show is that there is a very thick stratigraphic sequence of 3 meters, which is completely unique for the early pottery Neolithic in the Southern Levant. He could identify, of course, he called it late Yarmulkian layers, and then Yarmulkian, and then early Yarmulkian layers. And below it, he found as well some PPNC layer, and that's it. And it's quite unique because this site, strangely, is only occupied during the 7th millennium BC. So it's a chance because we don't have as well intrusive problems from earlier or later periods. So it's a key site for better understanding the PN transition in the Southern Levant. Of course, Yossi did some C14 radiocarbon dates, and it's quite interesting to see that the site is occupied from 6,500 BC to 5,900 BC. So I would say 600 years of continuous occupation from the PPNC to the late Yarmulkian. So of course, it's an ideal site to follow the emergence, the development, and the collapse of the first pottery making societies in the Southern Levant. So what we will do is that we will, in the new excavation project, we decided to excavate the entire stratigraphic sequence. By excavating the upper layers, we hope to better understand the collapse of the Yarmulkian culture. By excavating the medium layers that Yossi only reached in the sounding, that he did at the end of his excavation, we will try to better characterize the Yarmulkian culture and to better understand the organization of the society and its evolution through time. And as well, we will, of course, excavate the lower layers, which is very important to better understand the emergence of the first pottery-making societies in the Southern Levant. So, of course, because we will excavate 3 meters of stratigraphic sequence with a very rich material culture, we won't be able to excavate a large area as you see. So we decided to open a smaller excavation area in the northern part of Yossi's Garfinkel excavation. So I would say we will open an excavation area 15 meters by 15 meters, which is quite big. And we will excavate systematically the multiple Neolithic occupation layer that composed, that made up of the stratigraphic sequence. So this year we will excavate 3 weeks because it's our first excavation season there. We will excavate from the 6th of June to the 27th of June. And we will excavate following the principle of palethnographic approach established by the famous French prehistorian André Leroy-Gourhan. So we will do a very meticulous excavation. So each morning, so now I will explain how the field school will work. Each morning we will be in the field. The first day will consist in opening the excavation area. So here it's another site that Anna and I excavated in the previous year, but it's just to show you what will happen. So we will open the excavation area, and then we will put a grid 1 meter by 1, so to have a very accurate recording of the spatial distribution of the remains. We will then, of course, uncover the successive Neolithic occupation layers by following the slope of the future, very important, using different tools. So, of course, we will not use a lot, except at the beginning, we will not use any mechanical equipment. We will use pickaxes when we are on disturbed Neolithic occupation layer, but we will mainly do a very accurate excavation when we will uncover Neolithic occupation layers such as house floor, as you can see here, or burials, as we can see here. We will sieve all the sediments coming from a relevant archaeological context with different mesh, 5 millimeters, 2 millimeters, 1 millimeters, in order to collect all of the artifacts, including the smallest one, such as microphone, for example, or small beads, which are, of course, very important to better understand the environment and the culture of the early pottery Neolithic societies who lived at the sites. We will systematically document all of the stratigraphic units identified at the site. We will, of course, describe the type of archaeological context, if it's a wall, a floor, a pit, a sediment layer, and so on. We will, of course, describe the stratigraphic relationship with the other feature, if it's above, below, cut by, and so on. We will describe accurately the sediment filling and the artifact filling as well, and some information for the architectural remains. We will describe some information about the building techniques. We will take as well some photos at different scales. I just put here some example. For example, one stone feature. Here you can see a burial that we excavated in Nalsipori, for example, with a skull and some pottery shards. So, of course, we will systematically take photos of every feature. And we will do of course, some drawing based on photogrammetry. So you can see here, for example, a stone wall, here an house floor with some feature, and we use different colors to distinguish a different type of artifacts which were preserved on the house floor discovered at the site. So, for example, we use red to identify the pottery shards, blue for flint, green for animal bones, and so on. And of course, at the end, we will take some sediment sample for flotation, for example, and we will collect, of course, all of the artifacts, because I should say for the period, it's still scarce that all of the remains discovered at the site is kept. Because it's as you understood, the sites are really rich. It's full of flint, full of pottery, and so on. And so, in most of the case, the archaeologists are not able to keep all of the remains, but we decided to do it at Sha'ar Hagolan. So at break, after the fields, we will take lunch at the collective lunchroom of the kibbutz, and I think it would be a great experience for the students, so they can see how a traditional Israeli kibbutz can work. And then we can go potentially to the swimming pool, because in Sha'ar Hagolan in June, it will be very hot. So I'm sure we will enjoy the swimming pool. And then at the dinner time and evening, the student will stay at the guest house of the kibbutz, which is quite great, as you can see. So after the break, after the lunch break, we will give the team of the field school will give some lectures at the conference room of the Museum of Yarmulkian Culture, which is as well located inside the kibbutz of Sha'ar Hagolan. So we will have few lectures about the Neolithic in the Near East, and we will have as well a few lectures about, you know, excavations methods and pottery and flint studies, really general introduction, but I think it will be very useful for the students who will participate in the field school. And of course, after the lecture, we will process all of the artifacts discovered at the site. So as you understood, we will have some pottery, a lot of flint, basalt tools, animal bones, clay figurines, and so on. So we will wash the remains, then sort them, write the archaeological context information on them, and then record all of the remains in a database as well. And during the weekend, we will do some excursion. One in Nazareth, everyone knows about Nazareth, and we will go as well to Akko, which is a very old city with a mixture of Muslim, Jewish, and Christian people, and it's a very, very beautiful city, as you can see. So it's, of course, because Sha'ar Hagolan is a very big site, we will be quite a big team to coordinate the excavation of this site. So Anna and me, of course, will coordinate the excavation and the field school with the help of Kamen Boadjiev that I met in Kovachevo a long time ago. So it's a real pleasure to work again with a Bulgarian colleague. Brent Winford, who is a PhD student at the New York University, will manage the field documentation with me. Fanny Bocantin and Marie Anton, who are French colleagues, will manage the potential burials that we will find on the site, because it's important to have physical anthropologists who can excavate burials. And as well, Karina Rivel, who is doing her PhD at the University of Paris-Nanterre about the manufacturing processes of early pottery in the Southern Levant. And so she will as well participate to the excavation. So now, if you want, of course, to join us, if there is some students, you can go to the website of the Balkan Heritage Foundation and look at the Neolithic of the Holy Land excavation at the site of Sha'ar Hagolan, and you can find more details about the site and about the field school. And it will be a pleasure to welcome you. So if you have, I don't know, any questions about the sites, about the project, we will try to answer them.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anna and Julien. Thank you very much for this, for presenting to us this fantastic site in the entire setting. I have never seen a boring archaeological site, but it won't be to exaggerate to say that this site is extraordinary. And before I open the floor for discussion and questions, I will keep the first for me. Don't you need a Bronze Age specialist on this site? I'm really jealous.
No, there are Bronze Age sites nearby and somewhere above.
I wish you to not need a Bronze Age specialist, because this means that you have to cope with Bronze Age. So now floor is open for questions. We would prefer to hear the questions from you, but if you would like just to write them in the chat, this will also work. I will read them for you. Jenny, before she disappeared. I saw a raised hand. Jenny had a question, then she disappeared. Okay. I have actually two questions from a colleague, and her name is Agathe Reingruber from the Freie Universität in Berlin. She works in Thessaly now, early Neolithic in Thessaly, but has also experience from the Marmara area. She couldn't attend the lecture, but wishes you very much of luck for your project. And Agathe has two questions. The first one is, how do you explain the later appearance of pottery? You said in the introduction, Julien, that the pottery appears elsewhere by 7000 BC or so, and in Sha'ar Hagolan you have it like 700 years later. And here I would add that to me this resembles a little bit also the later appearance of rectangular architecture in the Southern Levant. You know, elsewhere you have rectangular architecture earlier, but in the Southern Levant you have kind of delay. This is the first question. I got this first question, and the second question is, Anna showed very well that you have imported finds from the Aegean and from the north, but do you see some a kind of trend or prevalence of contacts, some directionality, to say the contacts with to the sea are more important than the contacts to the inland, or the contacts to the north are more important than the contacts to the south? Thank you.
Okay, that's not easy questions. The first one, I don't know.
About the pottery.
I don't know why the pottery appears late, very late in the Southern Levant, because if you look all the supporting dates of early pottery in the Near East in general, the pottery technology appears at the very beginning of the 7th millennium BC in all regions of the Near East, except the Southern Levant.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really strange because it's obvious that we know that during the first half of the 7th millennium BC, when you have pottery in the Northern Levant, in Mesopotamia, and even a bit in southeastern Turkey, we know that the people in the Southern Levant are connected with them because they exchange obsidian, they share some burial practices, and so on. So
Symbolic words.
Symbolic words, and so on. So it's obvious that they met people who were making pottery. The question why they refused to adopt the pottery. And this is the question. And honestly, I don't know, because technologically, they knew everything. They knew how to make whiteware. They did some plaster floor. I mean, technologically, they could do it. But they decided that, I don't know why, they waited 800 years to adopt pottery.
Maybe until they're.
And I would say it's the problem as well is that we don't have a lot of data in the Central Levant. So it's very difficult to connect the Southern Levant with the other region of the Near East, because in the Central Levant we have nearly no data, because we are in Lebanon, you know that it's
Syria.
Yeah, and the southern part of Syria. And sadly, there is nearly no data. So it's a huge problem to make the connection between the Northern Levant and the Southern Levant. Then we should remind as well that we only look to the north, but we should keep in mind that we are very close to Africa when we are in the Southern Levant. And in Africa, in the northeastern part of Africa, pottery appears really early in this region. So one of the objectives of our project as well is to potentially try to understand the connection with Africa and with the northern part of the Levant.
And also to try to understand why then finally accepted, but not only accepted only few pottery. They just accept full repertoire, like I show you.
Yes.
Maybe they're.
So it seems quite sudden.
Yeah. You need to remember to keep in mind that it's also like a big acclimic event in this time.
8.2.
8.2 that actually started 8.6 or something.
Yeah.
So it's also big acclimic event. Maybe it's some kind of connected, but we need to.
So for the first question, we are sorry, but at the moment, we know that it appears late, but we don't know why. We don't know why.
Actually, about the second question about the connection with different items, in this period, it is declining of connection with the North because there are obsidian, but it's much lesser quantities than in previous pre-pottery Neolithic and much lesser quality that it's a later period in Halafian. So it's some sort of interruption in the connection to the North. And the connections to the South, it's never been so great. So it's few shells. And so it's now, this is probably a period that lost connections.
Yes, yes. So that's why, to come back to the first question, the appearance of pottery, which of course is the $1 million question. That's why your project is so important, because you will be able to clearly show what else does change with the appearance of pottery. And I am also optimistic that this rich typological, you have so many pottery types, and they will probably also lead you to one or the other area which may have given the stimulus for this sudden appearance. This is definitely something which will be a huge contribution of your project. Now we have two questions which goes to Anna, connected with the street, before I pass the words to Professor Maria Gurova. So Carol Snyder has a question on the street. What distinguishes a street communal structure from a cow path? Animals flow around buildings. And my question, I would add, which is also related with the street, is, isn't that a rather, you said that this street is rather clean, it was clean. And it seems to me that this was not the rule. Usually streets are very dirty. And I remember, even if I'm Bronze Age guy, I remember from my teachings that, for example, in Ashukluhuyuk, in the Konya area, in Cappadocia, they have very dirty streets and the spaces between the buildings. And this is their argument to think that the flat floors of the buildings, the flat roofs of the buildings were activity areas, and they were like discarding debris from the bitas, all these things which they found in the streets. So now, streets topic.
Okay, so first of all, what we see in the street, it's layers above layers above layers of floor buildings. So sometimes this is not lime, it's like clay surface. So they're by adding and adding just new floors and new floors, one on top of the other. And it's really peculiar why it's so clean, because you don't need to go to the Bronze Age. You see the medieval Europe. It's disaster, but probably it's also connected with the drainage system. So probably when it's really heavy rains, so it's also rain the water area. Because you see, I told you that streets has declining towards the rivers.
Yes, yes. And it's Caro adding, what about erosion? because of the inclination of the streets and the
This is probably why they needed always add to new layers and new layers of the surface.
Yes, this makes sense.
Yes, this is like tens of layers. Small stones are making the clay with small stones, and this is cover the street.
Okay, thank you. Maria Gurova.
Thank you, Bogdan. I would like first to say that it was really very interesting and let's say challenging lecture. Thank you for that. And I can just regret pretty much that I'm not a student to be able to join you in this absolutely amazing background in the kibbutz, swimming pool, etc., with so many flints. But seriously, my question is to Julien, because I know very well his passion about a really analytical, functional approach to pottery, not presumably functional and anticipatingly functional, but really analytically functional. So, Julien, do you think you will be able to practice this approach that you apply to Kovachevo, Lindensi, etc., early Neolithic Bulgarian pottery assemblages, to apply it to the part of this huge number of pottery from the side? Because actually a big part of the sequence in your site is literally contemporaneous with the very early strata in Kovachevo, finally. Even on the level of absolute chronology, you are, let's say, simultaneous, more or less. So will you be able to do that in the frame of this project, this residue analysis, this look deeply to the function of different shapes, types of pottery, etc.? Will be very relevant, by the way.
Thank you so much, Maria. Yes, of course, I started to do it on the pottery assemblages excavated by Yossi. And what I could, the general results is that we have quite a large diversity of function, as Anna explained. We have storage vessels, but as well cooking pots, which is quite important for the Near East because there is a huge debate if the first, the earliest pottery in the Near East were used for cooking or not. And in the Southern Levant, it's clear that part of the vessels were used on fire because I could identify a lot of soot deposit on the outer surface of the vessels, as well as carbonized residue inside. I could as well, and so some of my colleagues in France and in England actually are currently doing some residue analysis in order to try to identify which kind of substances they cooked. And it's quite interesting because I got recently the first results from phytoliths and starch analysis, which is quite not so common for pottery residue analysis. We try to, in general, we analyze lipids, which are related to, in general, animal substances, such as dairy products, animal fats, beeswax, and so on. But I wanted to use another proxy, such as phytoliths and starch, in order to identify plant substances, because I was deeply convinced they were used for cooking cereals. And so I sent some samples to my colleague Monica Ramsey, who is working at the MacDonald Institute of Cambridge University. And she, for the moment, she analyzed a small number of samples, but she could identify domesticated cereals, such as wheat and barley, but as well wild plants, which is quite interesting. So what can I say is that at least part of the vessels were used for cooking plant meal. Porridge. Something porridge. Another interesting result is that I could identify a lot of exfoliation on the inner surface of the ceramic vessels, And according to the ethnographic and experimental reference we have on pottery, I could say it could be related to salty or to salty content, salt, or to fermented beverage. The two options are possible because when you are in Sha'ar Hagolan, you are very close to the Dead Sea, where it's full of salt. If you know the Dead Sea, you will understand that in the environment, you have only salt. And fermented beverages, of course, as well possible. So we will try as well to do some residue analysis to test the two hypotheses.
And the experimental work.
Yeah, and do some experimental reference for better understanding the residue and the use where I could identify on the pottery.
Okay.
If I compare to Kovachevo, of course, the preservation of the assemblage is worse than in Bulgaria, but it's possible to do some research.
So it sounds very promising, let's say, and I wish you full success in this research and for the project as well. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. There is a question by Karol and then Małgorzata Grebska-Kulov. Karol Schneider asks whether you have indication of a pottery kiln, of a kiln of the site.
No.
Not so far, okay.
No, and for the period, unfortunately,
we don't know any.
To my knowledge, we don't know any. They are probably outside of the village, and as we never excavate outside the site, we couldn't find them.
Yes, okay, thank you. Małgorzata?
Thank you. Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation, and I learned a lot of your side. It's amazing, very interesting, and I wish you very good results. So my question is, what kind of activities they developed, they accentuate on agriculture or fishing or herding? What kind of domestic animals dominate on the site? And about the pottery, you have only this kind of ornamentation of incised lines. It's quite different what we have even in the same period in on the Balkans, in Thessaly, and then in the Central Balkans, you know. And I think that it was the ochre they put on the surface of pottery. It was after they burned this pottery. It was they put the painting after burning or before.
After.
And
yeah.
well,
no, before burning, after the incision.
Thank you.
Sometimes the vessel is only slip, have only red slip.
And what about agriculture? What kind, what activities they developed? Agriculture or herding or fishing?
All of them.
All of them.
They have also agriculture, and they have sheep, goats, and cattle, and they have pig bones, and there's big discussion if whether a pig is already domesticated or not, because they're all actually small, but it's still I don't know, it's too young to not too young to be killed. It is a big discussion about the pig because there are pigs in the area. They're living till today.
Thank you.
And regarding the pottery, if I can add something, Małgorzata, it's not so clear because we always speak about the incised pottery for the Yarmulkian culture. And I mean, in general, in the Southern Levant, we distinguish two main cultures, the Yarmulkian one and the Jericho 9 one. The Yarmulkian is, according to the literature, characterized by this incised pottery with incision.
Yeah.
And the Jericho 9 is red painted pottery.
And slip.
And slip. But the problem is that on every site, you have both ceramic production together. And so as well, on Yarmulkian site, we have red painted pottery, and some of them could, in my view, but it's really preliminary, but in my view, could be similar to the Thessalian one, but but I don't know. I don't know. We should. It would be nice to really compare and to be sure. And as you know, the early Neolithic in Thessaly is potentially a bit earlier than the one that we have here.
Yeah, or the same, but not later. This is the problem.
This is a problem.
Yeah, it's very interesting because according to Catherine Perles, it was the migration from the Levant. So
I know. And as you know, I'm not always agreeing with Catherine. But no, but I think it would be very interesting to compare the material culture from the two regions, because there is obviously some connection. I agree with Catherine. But the question is, in which sense? Because if the early Neolithic in Thessaly is earlier than the early pottery Neolithic in the Southern Levant, we should compare, but
maybe they have common ancestors.
Yeah.
Both came from.
Yeah, because the figurines are not so different. The general idea of Steratopigia is the same. The anthropomorphic figurines.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's not so different.
No.
The ideas are also this coffee bean eyes. So we call it because it's resemble coffee. It's
yeah.
Yes, but it's not. It resembles coffee with big eyes.
Right. You're absolutely right. Congratulations for this observation. And so there's something common thing, but so we have a lot to think to solve, to change theories, and I wish you good luck and
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And you are welcome to visit us at some point.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you want to excavate, you are more than welcome.
Yeah. Now the microphone goes to New York. Brent.
Thank you. I'm in Canada, actually. But
Canada, okay.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Very, very good presentation. I enjoyed it a lot. It renewed my excitement to join you all in June. So I very much look forward to that. First of all, I guess my question carries on with this problem with the origins of pottery and in which part of the world and so on. But we're talking about Thessaly, Southeast Europe. Now we're talking about the Levant, but we're not mentioning Anatolia so much in this relationship. And we think of the Levant as sort of the homeland of the Neolithic because of the domestication of cereals. But I think we know at this point that the domestication of animals comes more from sort of the periphery area in the Anatolian area, and that you really get the whole Neolithic package only after the PPNB, where domestic animals are introduced. So I'm wondering if you could elaborate a bit more on that, because Anna mentions that in this period you seem to have maybe a cutting off from the north versus a rapprochement. And I find this particularly interesting when you consider the appearance of pottery at that time. So I'm curious if you could elaborate a bit on the relationships with Anatolia, or Eastern Anatolia.
We don't have, as I already said, in this period, it's how I see this, the whole big picture. It's during the PPNB, it's some kind of a big koine show up, and we have a lot of connection with northern both Anatolia, northern Syria, Southern Levant, Northern Levant. It's like a big connection, and then something happened. And something happened not only in pottery, it's a little bit earlier than pottery Neolithic. It's in the end of pre-pottery Neolithic. All this big system just collapsed. And what we see, at least in Southern Levant, that they have instead of I don't know, some kind of big connection, coin, everything, everybody make similar culture. You have the same lime forms, the same big directional flint. You have a lot of local communities. Okay, the connection is lost. So each region, some kind of developed independently. So it's when in PPNB you have a lot of connection between actually the northern Levant in its connection point between Anatolia and the Southern Levant. In pottery Neolithics, this all the connection is collapsing. So what you see, the developing, it's going in different direction from there. So we don't have a lot of connection with, when I say the connection is lost, its connection is lost. Probably have some groups that still going travel to bring obsidian, but it's much less than they have before. And all the similarity, it's lost. So it's probably all the similarity you see during the pottery Neolithic, it's probably going from the same ancestor, it's different from the PPNB in different directions. So you don't have some connection, but it's sporadic and spontaneous.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. And if I understood correctly, then the use of pottery comes after the collapse of this coinage.
Yes. 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 And one of the point of our project is to understand the mechanism and then think why, because all this collapse, all this collapsing, and as a result of this collapsing, they start to produce pottery in Northern Levant. But it's not here, not in Southern Levant. In Southern Levant, they change the system, but not accept pottery until much later.
That's very interesting.
And if I may add, I would say that the data, we have a lot of data for the 9th and the 8th millennium KBC. We know plenty of PPNB sites, which were largely excavated and so on. And then 7th millennium KBC, the data are much more poor. Until very recently, we call the first half of the 7th millennium KBC in the Southern Levant the Palestinian hiatus, because we saw that no one was living there anymore. Just to show you that the data were really poor. And then during the 90s, there were a big excavation in Enrazal first, and then Ashkelon, and few PPNC sites were excavated. So we understood that for the first half of the 7th millennium KBC, we had some people, and now there were
then huge... we excavate Moza. The Moza is mega sites. It's about approximately 400 dune hectares. So it's huge size, 40 hectares, sorry.
PPNC as well.
PPNC, it's huge sites. Planet architecture, like 267 burials. It's not streets. No, it's only insulas. But
so and you know the excavation happened like the 2 past years. So we will get new data about the first half of the 7th millennium KBC, but it's still ongoing.
But no pottery.
And no pottery, and so and the transition between the PPN and the PN, we don't have any.
And this is not the small. It's not the sign to look for the transition, because it's huge site of PPNC. It's and very scarce finding of pottery Neolithic.
Very good. Thank you. That piqued my interest. I appreciate the response. Thank you.
I see that you will skip the swimming pool for discussions after the work. Instead of going to enjoy the nice swimming pool, you will discuss
You can discuss in a swimming pool also.
the swimming pool.
Yeah.
But if I may add, you said that you think that this 8.2 event, for those who are not familiar, it's supposed to be a drier climate and colder episode.
Colder and drier, yes.
Colder and drier. And you said that you have some indications that it started earlier.
Yes, there now it's researchers, maybe from mainly from Dead Sea sequence that point out that not the first signs of drier and colder climate. It's already, and it is from a Dead Sea Scroll and then from the Sorek caves. They're starting to be 8.6 or 8.5, and then 8.2. This is a real event.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So you have indications. It's
We do have indication even from the region.
For me as a Bronze Age guy, this is extremely interesting because we see that the climate becomes colder and people go to the north where it's colder, you know. It goes, so obviously the climate is not the reason for this migration. And I see the same thing in the 12th century BC, where in the end of the late Bronze Age, when we see, we have again theories about colder, the opposite, a colder event. And we see people coming to the south. You don't go to the south when it's because warmer. In the end of the Bronze Age, it's warmer. So again, if we can draw a parallel line, it's that the movement of people, it's not the simple answer to climatic changes.
No, but probably it's the answer, the pottery. We're not speaking about movement, but we're speaking about pottery acception. And pottery, and when you start to use the pottery, probably you expand the calories from your food. When it's drier in Israel, it's have a problem. Southern Levant has a water problem. When it's cooler, it's better. But when you have dry climate, it's lack of water. So probably the first pottery there was needed maybe for water, for keeping the water, or for enlarge your calories from this current food. Sometimes when you cooked food, it's make you more option for exploring the same stock you have to explore and to have more calories from this.
Yes, thank you. Our 90 minutes have gone without taking notice because it was so interesting. There is a very last question by Carol, which goes in the same direction as Brand's question about the connections, about Anatolia. How far does your flint come from? Do you have raw material coming from far away? No, it's rather local.
No, this is one of also one of the hallmarks of pottery period. Then they're not have not have such type of investment in the flint tools. So most of the raw material came from local within a few kilometers from the site.
Yes.
From most pottery Neolithic sites.
Yes.
There is a huge amount of flint.
There are a lot of flints. They make it on site, and there are most of ad hoc and flakes industry.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. It was extremely interesting. There are so many questions. It sounds like the ideal project. You have a strong stratigraphic sequence to excavate. You have so many questions to answer. The only thing is we can say is thank you very much. We wish you a lot of luck in this project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we're looking forward for your next lecture when you will report the results, because
Thank you.
it's for sure. Thank you to all who participated with questions and comments as well. And wish you a very nice rest of the weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye. Take care. Bye.
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 Bye.